Hana and Henry, a love that stood the test of time. The bustling city of New York was home to millions, yet within the walls of Grand Heights University, two souls would find each other amidst the chaos. Hana, a beautiful, ambitious young woman from a wealthy family, was admired by many. Henry, on the other hand, was a hard-working, intelligent young man from a poor background, determined to build a better future for himself. Their paths crossed in the university library one rainy afternoon. Hana was struggling with a finance assignment, flipping through pages with frustration. Henry, noticing her distress, leaned over with a gentle smile. "Need some help?" he asked. His voice was calm, reassuring. Hana looked up, her emerald eyes meeting his deep brown ones. She hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Yes, actually, these numbers don't make sense to me." Henry sat beside her, explaining the concepts patiently. As the minutes passed, she found herself not just understanding the assignment but also feeling an unexpected warmth in Henry's presence. Their study sessions became frequent. And soon, laughter and shared dreams replaced the silence between them. Hana, despite being wealthy, admired Henry's resilience. Henry, despite his struggles, saw in Hana a kindness he never expected from someone of her status. The blossoming love. Their friendship quickly evolved into something deeper. One evening, after a long day of studying, Henry took Hana to a quiet park near campus. The city lights twinkled behind them as they sat on a wooden bench. "Hana, I don't know how to say this, but I think I'm falling for you," Henry confessed, his voice slightly trembling. Hana's heart raced. She had felt the same way but never imagined Henry would have the courage to admit it. "Henry, I feel the same," she whispered, squeezing his hand. That night marked the beginning of their love story. They spent every free moment together, studying, going to the gym, attending church, and dancing at parties. Their bond grew stronger with every shared experience. Henry introduced Hana to the simple joys of life, eating street food, watching sunsets from the rooftop of his small apartment, and walking through the rain without umbrellas. Hana, in return, opened Henry's world to luxury, inviting him to elegant dinners and social events. The test of time. But love is often tested by circumstances. As graduation approached, pressure mounted. Hana's parents, who had always expected her to marry into wealth, began noticing her relationship with Henry. "You can't be serious about this boy, Hana," her mother scoffed one evening. "He has nothing to offer you. He has love," Hana replied stubbornly. "He has ambition. Isn't that enough?" "Love doesn't pay the bills," her father interjected. "You have a future waiting for you, and Henry is not part of it." Despite their disapproval, Hana and Henry continued their relationship. They made a promise to each other to build a life together, no matter the odds. Henry worked multiple jobs after graduation, trying to secure a stable future. But life was tough. While Hana lived comfortably in her family's mansion, Henry struggled to afford rent. The differences between their worlds became more evident. Henry often felt out of place at the extravagant events Hana took him to, while Hana found it difficult to adjust to Henry's modest lifestyle. Then came the breaking point. A wealthy businessman named Jason entered Hana's life. He was everything Henry wasn't: rich, influential, and charming. Hana's parents adored him. One evening, Hana sat Henry down, her eyes filled with sorrow. "Henry, I love you, but I can't do this anymore. My parents will never approve. Life with you is too uncertain." Henry felt his heart shatter. "So you're choosing money over love?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Tears streamed down Hana's face. "I have to think about my future," she whispered before walking away. leaving Henry alone in the darkness. The unexpected turn of fate. Heartbroken, Henry vowed to prove himself. He moved to another city, took up a better job, and started his own tech business. Years of hard work and sleepless nights finally paid off. His company became a massive success. Meanwhile, Hana married Jason, believing she had secured her future. But wealth didn't bring her happiness. Jason was controlling and unfaithful. She felt trapped in a loveless marriage. One day, Jason's business collapsed due to fraud allegations, and they lost everything. He abandoned Hana, leaving her broke and alone, struggling to survive. Hana swallowed her pride and took a job as a waitress in a small cafe. She often thought about Henry, wondering where life had taken him. Fate had its own plans. One evening, a black luxury car pulled up outside the cafe. A familiar face stepped out Henry. Hana gasped. He looked different, confident, successful, and powerful. She felt a lump in her throat as she approached him. "Henry," she whispered, her voice trembling. He turned, his eyes meeting hers. A flicker of emotion crossed his face before he composed himself. "Hana," he said, his voice calm but distant. She wanted to apologize, to explain, but words failed her. I made a mistake," she finally admitted, tears welling up. Henry sighed, looking at her with a mixture of sadness and understanding. "I loved you, Hana, but love isn't just about choosing the easy path. It's about standing by each other through the struggles." She nodded, tears falling freely. "I know, and I lost the only real thing I ever had." Henry hesitated before reaching into his pocket, pulling out a small envelope. "I came here for business, but I also heard what happened to you. This is for you." She opened it, shocked to see a check for a large amount. "Henry, I can't accept this," she whispered. "It's not charity," he said softly. "It's a reminder that the world isn't always about wealth. Sometimes the people we underestimate end up surprising us." Henry walked away, leaving Hana staring at his retreating figure. She realized too late that she had let go of the only person who truly loved her. Henry sat in his luxury office, staring out of the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the city skyline. The world that once seemed so out of reach was now his. Yet, despite the wealth, the power, and the success, there was an emptiness in his heart that he couldn't ignore. He had everything he once dreamed of, yet something was missing, something that no amount of money could replace. He ran his fingers through his neatly styled hair, exhaling deeply as memories of Hana flooded his mind. He thought about the way she used to laugh, the way her eyes lit up when she was excited, and the way she once told him she loved him with all her heart. He had believed her then. He had believed that nothing could break them apart. But love, as he learned, wasn't always enough. Hana had chosen security over struggle, comfort over uncertainty. And now, years later, life had flipped the script in the cruelest way possible. He had risen beyond his wildest dreams, while she had lost everything. The image of her in that small cafe haunted him. She looked so different from the girl he had once known, tired, lost, a shadow of her former self. He had expected to feel satisfaction, even a sense of revenge, but all he felt was sadness. He had loved her once, and perhaps, in some distant corner of his heart, he still did. Hana sat alone in her tiny apartment, staring at the check Henry had given her. She hadn't cashed it. She didn't know if she ever would. It wasn't just money, it was a painful reminder of the man she had abandoned. The man who had once given her his entire heart. And now he was gone, just as she had once walked away from him. Tears slipped down her face as she curled up on the old couch, hugging her knees to her chest. She had spent so much of her life chasing what she thought she needed: wealth, status, a perfect future. But what had it all amounted to? Nothing. She had gained everything and lost the only thing that had ever truly mattered. Her phone buzzed beside her, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was a message from an old college friend, inviting her to a charity gala. For a moment, she considered ignoring it. But then she thought of Henry. He had built himself from nothing. Maybe she could do the same. Dressing in a simple but elegant dress, she arrived at the gala, surrounded by familiar faces from her past. But she wasn't the same Hana they had once known. She no longer carried the arrogance of privilege. She was just a woman trying to find her way again. And then, across the room, she saw him. Henry. He looked breathtaking in his tailored suit, exuding power and confidence. He was surrounded by business elites, people who now sought his attention. But his eyes were the same, deep, thoughtful, and piercing. Their gazes locked. 1,000 unspoken words passed between them in an instant. The room faded, and for a moment, it was just them. Hana took a deep breath, her heart pounding. She didn't know what she would say, or if he would even listen. But she had to try. She walked toward him, her hand slightly trembling. "Henry," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the music. He turned fully to her, his expression unreadable. "Hana," he said simply. She swallowed hard, her throat tightening. I never got to say I'm sorry for everything." He studied her, his eyes searching hers. "I know." She blinked, surprised by his response. "You do." He nodded. "I spent years being angry, wondering why I wasn't enough. But I've realized something. It wasn't just about money. You were scared. You wanted stability. And I can't blame you for that." Tears welled in her eyes. "I was a fool," she admitted. "I thought love wasn't enough. But now I see. Love is everything." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Hana, we can't undo the past." "I don't want to undo it," she said quickly. I just want to know if there's still a chance for us." His jaw tightened. "Hana, I'm not the same man I was back then. I've changed." "I know," she said, stepping closer. "And I love the man you've become." Silence stretched between them, filled with years of pain, longing, and unresolved emotions. Finally, Henry spoke. "I don't know if we can just pick up where we left off." "I don't expect that," she whispered. "But maybe we could start again?" For the first time in years, Henry let himself feel the depth of what he had buried. He had spent so long building walls around his heart, convincing himself that he had moved on. But standing here, looking at her, he knew the truth. He had never stopped loving her. Hana reached for his hand, hesitating before touching him. He didn't pull away. Instead, he looked at her for a long moment before squeezing her fingers gently. "Maybe," he murmured. Hope flickered in Hana's chest. It wasn't a promise, but it was something, a chance, and that was all she needed. Months passed, and their paths began to intertwine again. It wasn't easy. Trust had to be rebuilt, wounds had to heal, but step by step, they found their way back to each other. Henry learned that love wasn't about proving his worth. It was about forgiving and moving forward. Hana learned that love wasn't about luxury, it was about choosing someone, even when times were uncertain. One evening, as they sat on the rooftop of Henry's penthouse, watching the city lights twinkle, Hana turned to him. "Henry." He murmured, his arm wrapped around her. She smiled, her heart full. "Thank you for giving me another chance." He kissed her forehead softly. "Love doesn't always get a second chance, Hana, but when it does, you don't waste it." And under the vast city skyline, they chose each other again. Not because they were perfect, but because they had learned that love, true love, was always worth fighting for. Moral lesson: true love isn't about perfection, but about growth, forgiveness, and second chances. Material wealth fades, but love and loyalty stand the test of time. Sometimes life brings people back together, not because they never should have parted, but because they had to learn what truly matters.